Welcome to Shares from the American College of Financial Services, where we're invested in expanding your opportunities. Here's a look at what we'll be sharing with you today.
Republicans realize that revenues have to be part of the solution because no one's going to accept a 20% benefit cut across the board when the trust funds are depleted in the early 2030s. And Democrats have to realize that some sort of benefit change has to be on the table, whether it's raising the retirement age, whether it's changing the cost of living to a changed CPI, whether it's taxing benefits for higher income people. There's going to have to be a balance. It can't just be a binary, all benefits, all revenues.
I'm Steve Parrish, professor of practice at the American College of Financial Services and a scholar in residence at the American College Center for Ethics and Financial Services. I'll tell you what, with the big legislative changes under discussion, the Social Security program in particular is facing an increasingly uncertain future, which has the potential to impact literally millions of Americans at or near retirement. So next month, I'll be hosting an in-depth discussion of the latest developments on Social Security. But here today to provide kind of a preview of what's in store is Jason Fichtner. Now, Jason is a senior fellow at the Bipartisan Policy Center and executive director of the Retirement Income Institute Alliance for Lifetime Income. His areas of expertise include Social Security, federal tax, budget policy, retirement security, and a lot more. So, Jason, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us.
Well, thanks for having me on, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Well, great. Let's just kind of get right into it. I've been following your research and writing for years, but for our audience, can you tell us a little more about what it is you do?
Sure. So I'm an economist by training, and I have had a long career in DC. The joke now is I'm on the 32nd year of my 5-year plan in DC, because no one moves here thinking they're going to stay here, but you end up putting down roots and staying here. And I've had stints at Treasury, IRS, Capitol Hill, Arthur Anderson, again, the Social Security Administration, where I was the deputy commissioner, the number 2 position, and also the chief economist. I've taught at Johns Hopkins and Georgetown, and as you mentioned, at the Bipartisan Policy Center. I also serve on the FINRA Foundation Board, and I'm the chair of the Puerto Rico Pension Reserve Trust. So I have a lot of different hats that I wear at any one point in time, and my research focuses on 3 sort of main buckets, and I've testified before Congress on all 3. One is tax policy, so I'm basically, my PhD is in federal tax policy. Retirement security, including Social Security and entitlements. And then the third bucket is federal fiscal and budget policy, which we can talk about as well. Those are the 3 main areas of my research interest. And lately it's been more on the retirement security and on helping people guarantee protected income in retirement.
Well, and relative to that, your work with the Peak 65 project's been compelling. So can you just tell the audience a little more about that project and this changed retirement environment and landscape?
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you. So Peak 65 refers to the period between 2024, so starting last year, through 2027. And what that is it's going to be the peak time in which we have the most number of people turning 65 ever. It is 4.1 million Americans turning 65 every year. That's 11,200 a day on average, starting in 2024 through 2027. And what it allows us is to rethink about the retirement environment we face, because there's so many people turning the traditional retirement age of 65. Is that still valid? And to rethink about what it means for people's retirement security, because we are shifting the landscape in which people used to have Social Security as the bedrock with a defined benefit pension plan and some personal savings. That was the original 3-legged stool. And now we have Social Security, which still is only designed to replace about 40% of your income on average in retirement, but that DB plan is basically gone for most people. We now have the defined contribution, or the 401k generation, and they have been raised to save, save, save for retirement. They get to retirement, we don't tell them how to turn that into a spending plan. And that has to make up what was the defined pension plan. So now, how do we help people have a paycheck for life and convert some of that defined contribution asset into protected income on top of Social Security, so they don't run out of money and they have enough to have a financially secure retirement for the rest of their life?
Translating that into policy, I'm kind of curious. It's got to be tricky, even frustrating maybe. dealing with policy issues in this, polarized political environment. So how do you manage to work on a bipartisan basis?
It's tough, it's challenging, rewarding at the same time. So, as a quick side, and I always like to make the joke, and it's not a joke, it's actually true, but the Bipartisan Policy Center is the only organization registered in the District of Columbia with the word bipartisan in its title. And as an economist, that shows you it's both a supply and demand problem, right? So basically, there was a point in time when I joined the Bipartisan Policy Center, several years ago, in which people would come to me and say, I'm doing God's work. You're helping people come together across the aisle. And recently it's become the opposite. People are like, bipartisan, that means compromise. We don't want to do that. It's our way or the highway, left versus right. And that's the frustrating part. But when you get people in a room, one of the areas that still has bipartisan support is retirement. Democrats and Republicans want to make sure people have a secure retirement, whether that's shoring up Social Security, helping folks have access to a defined contribution plan, save for their retirement, helping them with a spending plan. So that is still bipartisan. And we've seen examples with Secure 1 and Secure 2.0, which we've got that done on a bipartisan basis, in which President Trump signed the first one, President Biden signed the second one. It is bipartisan, and so it's getting folks to talk about the challenges. And once you have them air and talk and discuss challenges, you can get to solutions. And so I'm actually pretty confident we will get to additional retirement security solutions on a bipartisan basis over the next few years.
Well, it's always good to hear some good news. And thinking of this, many of our audience in this podcast are financial advisors. So thinking of what you go through, do you have any words of wisdom to help them stay above the political fray when they're working with their own clients?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same sort of, I think, discussions we're used to having with customers and clients about thinking about the long term. And I'll give an example. People come in and talk all the time about Social Security and claiming. And some people claim Social Security benefits at age 62, which is the minimum monthly benefit amount. Again, each year you delay, you can get roughly about an 8% increase in your monthly benefits up to age 70. But I hear a lot of people coming in and talking at age 62 saying, I'm concerned that Social Security will not be there for me and that the trust fund is going to be depleted or Social Security is going, quote unquote, bankrupt. So I'm going to take it, 62 and get what I can out of it now. And I think for like financial advisors, professionals, and the rest of us in the media and policymakers, we have to tell them that Social Security is not going anywhere. Even in a worst case scenario, and I do say worst case, you're looking at a 20% reduction, but Social Security is not going bankrupt. And given the political environment we're in today, where it seems like, tariffs are announced one day, they're taken back the next day, the role for a financial professional is to be calm, collective, and keep their client focused on the long term and not make rash decisions just based on short-term fluctuations in both rhetoric or policy.
Yeah, it's a challenge. We're going to talk more about Social Security when we have this webcast in March. What are the other big policy issues that you are working on right now that deal with retirement?
So, the two sort of main ones that come in, one, of course, is tax policy. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expires at the end of this year, and Congress is currently going through the process of trying to figure out whether or not they're going to just extend the tax cuts, whether they're going to modify them, make them permanent. And we're seeing that debate happen right now in the House and Senate. And of course, President Trump wants to make sure his signature tax cuts are at least extended, if nothing else. But we're working through to try to make sure we have reasonable tax policy that includes retirement and that there aren't any gimmicks. Like Congress is trying to find pay-fors to try to offset tax cuts. We're trying to make sure gimmicks like Rothification don't come in, where basically you're trying to tell everyone they can't do a traditional IRA anymore and it's got to all be Roth. But that's just a financing gimmick for tax scoring purposes. It's not actually real good policy. So we're trying to make sure Congress does good tax policy, not bad tax policy. The other thing, of course, is just trying to get some fiscal discussion about the unsustainable debt the U.S. has. Right now, we've got a $36 trillion national debt, a $2 trillion deficit, and these seem to be continuing as far as the eye can see. And so even when discussing the role of tax policy and extending the tax cuts, which I think are very important for Americans, both for working American savers and for retirees, it's also keeping in mind that we do have spending issues and we have to right size our spending and also think about what kind of revenues we might need going forward to try to get closer to balancing. I gotta say we're going to balance the budget, but getting it more realistic so we don't have multiple $1 trillion deficits that lead to $1 trillion and more each year in interest payments.
Your one-stop shop for valued and valuable CE is here. Introducing Knowledge Hub Plus, a new just-in-time learning platform from the American College of Financial Services. Enjoy access to the profession's best and brightest, with over 60 hours of college and CFP board-approved CE from more than 35 trusted academics, practitioners, and industry experts. And with new CE added monthly, exclusive live webcasts on timely topics, and built-in automated reporting, it's never been easier to get the answers you want while earning the CE you need. Know now with Knowledge Hub Plus. Learn more, subscribe, and expand your expertise today at theamericancollege.edu/knowledgehubplus.
Well, I used to go up on the Hill and we talked to so many of the staff members, but I got to ask, now that we have so many legislative staffs and committees that have changed, I mean, fairly radically, how do you provide the feedback on key issues and who's listening and who needs to listen to?
So we do a variety of things. So one, we of course do like podcasts like this, webinars, we talk to media and that gets attention. We also do Hill briefings. So the Bipartisan Policy Center, the Alliance for Lifetime Income, our members and trade associations are constantly up in the Hill talking to new members and staff about these important issues. And again, I think it's important to note that I do not lobby. I'm not a lobbyist. I'm a PhD. I educate. So I go up there and educate members and staff about the issues, answer their questions, tell them about the challenge that we face. And instead of endorsing solutions, I give them options for reform or options to help close a gap or options to address the challenges that we're facing in retirement, tax policy and fiscal policy, and walk them through ideas so they can talk to their bosses and then hopefully move forward with some legislation and on those issues. And that's how we do it. We make ourselves available. And staff are very open. I mean, when you go in and say, look, I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm here to talk to you. What questions do you have? We're a resource. Once you offer yourself as a resource, they take you up on it. And so we've been pretty busy lately.
Well, that's good. I mean, at least you can figure out who to get to or try to get to. So let me ask it this way. If you could get Congress's attention regarding what I'll call the retirement income crisis, what would you want to see them do? And what I'm saying is, should there be a Secure Act 3.0 or something like that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question because, again, I think with retirement security, it still is a bipartisan area we can still do some work on. And while we're still implementing Secure 1 and Secure, and I do want to give it time to let people get used to what's in there and see what barriers and challenges might come exist that we need to work on, I think there is a Secure 3.0 in the future, for lack of a better name. We had 1 and 2, so we're just going to call it 3. But what we're seeing now is in 1 and 2, we remove some barriers, reduce some barriers to providing annuities and protected income in defined contribution plans. And I think we need to go a little bit further and allow for more default options. So we can have default options, for example, in target date funds. And we still have some employers and plan sponsors that are concerned about fiduciary liability. And again, I'm an economist, not a lawyer. And so I've heard some people say, oh no, Secure 1 and Secure 2 took care of that. And some people saying, no, it didn't. So I really want to see how 1 and 2 play out. And if we still have plan sponsors and employers concerned about being sued, then let's work on Secure 3.0 to make sure there are some reasonable safe harbors so we can offer some default options in like target date funds or defined contribution plans so people have those protected income options when they retire to help solve that retirement income challenge.
That's interesting because, I mean, obviously Secure and Secure 2.0 have lifetime income features. What's your gut? Do you think, is it starting to help yet? I mean, are we getting any evidence that people are starting to use annuities or offering it through plans? How's it going with that?
Yeah, we are seeing it. And some companies have stepped forward. For example, BlackRock has LifePath Paycheck. Prudential has something they announced last month. Fidelity's announced something. TIA's always had some annuity options. I think what we need to see also is some more innovation. For example, some people are concerned about having the lifetime income options. They're concerned about handing over a large sum of money for a monthly stream that lasts the rest of their life. We can offer like some innovative. So like TIA, if you just Google it, it's called Income Test Drive. And what they've done is to try to get over the hurdle of people, the behavioral hurdle, people handing over and surrendering money and then having that buyer's remorse, is they basically offer you a fixed term annuity. And for 2 years, you start getting this paycheck every month in your retirement, your annuity, And if within 2 years you decide you don't want it, you can cancel and get the rest of your money back. But the idea is they think you're going to like it. After 2 years, then you default into that lifetime annuity option for the rest of your life. So it's a trial annuity. They call it income test drive. Another innovation we're starting to see, and I'm actually writing a paper on it with TIA right now, is something we're calling a bridge annuity. So imagine someone says, look, I'm really concerned about turning over, surrendering a lot of money for a lifetime annuity, but I like this idea of some sort of protected income and I want to have more protected income. What else could I do? So a bridge annuity would be, say someone comes in at age 62 and wants to claim Social Security. And we say, wait, if you get it at 62, that's the minimum monthly benefit amount. You could get up to 8% more if you wait each year roughly until age 70. What if we give you a fixed term annuity that starts at age 62 that mimics your age 62 Social Security benefit, but is a bridge to age 70? So it's an 8-year fixed term annuity. It ends at 70, and then at 70, you claim Social Security for a higher monthly benefit amount that is inflation adjusted for the rest of your life. I'd like to see those innovations be part of potentially Secure 3.0 as a default option, or so someone could choose that or employer could offer it and not have to worry about being sued from fiduciary responsibilities.
It's kind of exciting. I guess another one is we've seen those, what's it called, contingent deferred annuities.
Yeah.
And I saw that it's just a private letter ruling, so it doesn't have precedent, but at least there's a private letter ruling from the IRS saying we're okay on that, which we do need to have the tax exclusion, the tax advantage of a lot of these annuity type plans, or it's not going to sell as well.
Yeah, and I would also like, this is where you start getting remixed tax policy, and I would like to be a little bit more creative and start working with Congress about how we might want to make it more advantageous from a tax perspective to have people annuitize some of their 401k assets. Maybe we make the annuities tax-free. And so there's ideas we could think about how we might do this to encourage folks to actually annuitize and not wait for the RMDs or something else.
Well, we're going to be talking again in March about Social Security, but let's talk a little bit on that. And in general, what do you think really needs to be done to buttress the funding of Social Security and Medicare? And obviously with the new Fairness Act, that's just going to make it even tougher to get the numbers to match. What needs to happen to really get funding right in Social Security and Medicare?
Yeah, so I think on the Social Security and Medicare, but mostly with Social Security, one thing to point out is that there's an opportunity cost to delay. So, for example, when I was the Deputy Commissioner of Social Security, I signed 3 of the annual trustee reports. And I was the Deputy Commissioner across the Bush and Biden administration, so I covered over both. And back then, when we issued one of the reports, if we decided at that time, I'm not saying I endorsed it, but if we decided to raise and eliminate the Social Security payroll tax maximum, right now there's a cap on it. If we had just gotten rid of the cap, that would have solved the 75-year solvency. Now it doesn't. It gets you 30 to 40%, maybe 50, depending if you give benefit credits. But we lost that as a single option. And the delay means that the delta gets larger and larger. Of course, we get the trust fund depletion. And so what has to happen is you need to have Republicans realize that revenues have to be part of the solution because no one's going to accept a 20% benefit cut across the board when the trust funds are depleted in the early 2030s. And Democrats have to realize that some sort of benefit change has to be on the table, whether it's raising the retirement age, whether it's changing the cost of living to a changed CPI, whether it's taxing benefits for higher income people. There's going to have to be a balance. It can't just be a binary, all benefits, all revenues. There's got to be a compromise. And the sooner Congress gets to that decision, because the public understands it, the sooner we'll actually have some meaningful reform. But it's going to have to be a bipartisan balance to get something done. On Medicare, the challenge with Medicare and Social Security, it's an actuarial thing. Like we can all sit in a room and we know the numbers, and the question is politically, how do you want to solve the puzzle pieces? Medicare becomes a little bit more challenging because you don't really know the cost of healthcare going forward. Are we going to cover under Medicare the drugs for weight loss, for example? What new drugs might come out? So it's trying to really figure out how you do the cost sharing of Medicare premiums, what we want to cover, what shouldn't be covered. Those are challenges. And I think at some point we're going to have to recognize as a country, which other countries have, that we can't pay for everything. That we're going to have some quality of life adjustments or some cost benefit analysis that says, given the cost of these procedures or drugs, we aren't going to cover it, and that's going to be the end of it. And end of life care, we're going to have to be a little bit more nuanced about palliative care, stay at home care, and not have people stay in hospitals all the time because hospitals are really expensive. And we need to have that discussion as a nation. Until we get there, I think we're going to have a really hard time solving the Medicare healthcare challenge.
Yeah, I like your point that it's not just actuarial. I recall 2 years ago when my Medicare went up so much because of this wonderful new Alzheimer drug that it exceeded the cost of living on my Social Security, and then
Yep.
they pulled the drug after that anyway. So they got to get that right, and I guess that's something that you're never going to get actuarially right. We have to accept the fact that there may be some changes coming up with that.
Yeah, and it's tough. And you also get to we spend the most amount of care on the last 6 months of life, but you never know when your last 6 month life are until you die and someone looks backwards. But we've got to do a better job of thinking about what that actually means for people's care.
Well, let me cover one last big area. So much of your focus is on lifetime income. Why is that so important for retirement planning?
So this goes back to my early days at Social Security. When I walked into Social Security 15 years ago, we actually had posters everywhere across the nation that said 66, 62, 65, 70. And the initial sort of plug, if you think about this from an ordering and behavioral standpoint, is people see 62, 65, 70, and they anchor on 62. And Social Security still calls age 62 the early eligibility age. Now, Steve, who wants to be late for their government benefits? Nobody. We've been trying for years to change the nomenclature to call age 62 the minimum monthly benefit age and age 70 your maximum monthly benefit age, because that would change just the conversation. And when I would go into field offices and talk to real people about why they were there, the number one transaction that Social Security does is replacement Social Security cards. You lose it, you change your name through marriage, you get another one. But the number one question Social Security gets asked is, when should I claim Social Security retirement benefits? And back then, the agency was using something called the break-even analysis. So if you walked in at 62, they would say, hey, you're 62. If you claim benefits today at 62, you'll be ahead for 14 years. Never telling them that if you live past 76, you're then behind for the rest of your life. So we did change the policy at Social Security. Commissioner Astor was the commissioner, and I was the deputy commissioner. And we got rid of the break-even analysis and made it more of a personal decision. We walked people through the things they should think about before deciding when to claim retirement benefits. And I saw that challenge that people had because people would get benefits at 62, and as they aged, they would have higher healthcare expenses or higher income needs, and they didn't have it. And they thought maybe Social Security was going to provide 100% of their income needs in retirement, and it doesn't. Again, it's designed to replace on average about 40%. For lower income people, it replaces more. For higher income, it's less. But that made me realize we were having an income challenge. And when I started asking people who felt they were well off versus not well off, one of the differences was pensions. For folks that had a pension on top of Social Security, they basically had that budget constraint that allowed them to spend more. Those that didn't have a pension, they had Social Security, whether they had savings or not, they were trying to rely on Social Security, and it wasn't enough. And then they got nervous that they were going to run out of money and they didn't want to spend their 401k assets. So I then started looking at how do we help people have a better budget constraint with more additional protected income, because Social Security is an annuity. It is the only inflation protected annuity out there right now. And so I realized we need to have better and additional protected income on top of Social Security, and that needed to be a national policy goal. And that's what I've been working on. That's when I started working on it, when I was at Social Security.
Yeah, the issue is living too long, and you're looking for a income you can't outlive. I mean, that's really what lifetime income is. A quick question on something you said. Do you think that now that the Social Security benefit form doesn't do the 62, 60, well, full retirement age and 70, do you think that's helping at all getting people to make the right decision, or is it too early to tell?
So this realizing we say, like, people talk about what's the optimal decision, what's the right decision. It's a personal decision. So I don't want to say there's one right or one wrong, but I want people to make an informed decision about their options. And that requires them to have more information, not less. And what we have seen over the last several years since we started instituting the policy of getting break even is that while age 62 is still the modal age, the most frequent age people claim benefits, the average age has been increasing over time. So people are now realizing that age 62 might not be the best one from them, and they're delaying claiming till 63, 4, 5, 6, 7, or up until age 70. And I think what's important to realize for people is you can always go in and talk to somebody at Social Security and decide that today is not the day for you. Come back tomorrow, come back next week, come back next year. It is, if you can afford, what I tell people is if you can afford to delay, you are better off delaying. And again, Social Security is the Old Age Survivors and Disability Insurance Program. It is an insurance program by design. It was never meant to be your sole source of retirement income. It's an insurance program. So think about it holistically as part of your retirement income. And how do you want to make that the bedrock, and what do you add on top?
Yeah, and we've crunched the numbers at the American College every which way, including using Monte Carlo simulations, and delaying makes so much more sense. And there are very few rare examples where it makes sense to go ahead and take it early. So part of it is just getting that message out. And that kind of leads to my last question in a way. We're going to be in for a tough few weeks, months, whatever, as we're trying to sort out legislative priorities. Are we going to tax Social Security? Aren't we? All that kind of stuff. So from your perspective and all your experience in working with Congress, any last words for our financial advisors on how they can help their clients really navigate in these very turbulent times where it's tough to guess what's going to happen next?
Well, and I think that's the issue, right? So how do you focus in the long term? The short term is right in front of you and very turbulent, and you want to make sure you weather the short term so you reach your long-term goals. And I think the advice is, versus going full circle to where we started, Steve, is keep the eye on the long-term ball. You need to be aware of what's going on policy-wise, but don't be reactionary, because like discussions of whether or not we're going to tax tips, are we going to tax Social Security? I think a lot of that's political rhetoric. Does it mean it won't happen? No, but I'm not sure I would change my portfolio around to think it's going to until it actually does. So I think right now in turbulent times, the best thing I think to do is you still stick with your long-term plans, and you keep your eye on the ball and you adjust accordingly, but you don't be reactionary.
Words to the wise. Well, Jason, thank you once again for sharing your knowledge with us. It's been a great conversation. And to the audience, I just want to say, don't forget, for a deeper dive into the topics discussed here, specifically getting into Social Security, join Jason, me, and some others. We got a webcast coming up at 2 p.m. on Tuesday, March 18th, and you can find a link to register in the episode description here. So Jason, thanks again. It was great.
My pleasure. And if you're interested in the Peak 65 research, you can just Google my name and Peak 65, and you'll see the paper for free download from the Alliance for Lifetime Income's Retirement Income Institute website.
And I encourage everybody to do that. That's what I did. It was wonderful to read. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Steve.
That's all for now, but you can find all our episodes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and most other streaming services. Be sure to like us, follow us, and leave us a rating and review. Shares is a production of the American College of Financial Services, and we hope you join us next time as we share ideas that expand your opportunities.